I stood in dirt that wouldn't give, staring at rows that held more hope than harvest. The garden was my battlefield, the only one that mattered anymore. April sun barely warmed my shoulders as I surveyed the damage of another failed attempt. Carrots stunted like broken promises, beans refusing to climb their stakes. Soil packed hard as my resolve, clay heavy and unforgiving. My hands were already blistered, determination outpacing knowledge by miles I couldn't measure. Through the cabin window, I could see them sleeping still. Michael 12 now, Emma 9, Lucy 6, and baby Ruth just 3, 4 faces that depended on me, 4 reasons I couldn't afford to fail. Their father, 18 months buried under prairie soil that took him faster than I could fight it. Fever came in spring, took him by summer. Left me with children and land and a garden I didn't know how to make feed us. I'd learned flowers from my mother, roses and lilacs, things pretty and useless. My husband Daniel had handled the vegetables, the practical growing. I'd stood beside him sometimes, half listening while he explained companion planting and crop rotation. Thought I had time to learn properly. Turns out, time's the first thing death steals, before it takes everything else. The neighbors stopped visiting after that first winter. People look at widows in 2 ways, either with pity that makes you small, or judgment that makes you wrong. I'd learned to prefer being alone. Actually, at least alone. Nobody watched you fail. I dragged my shovel across the packed earth. Thud. Resist. Refuse. The sound of my life since Daniel died. Every failed seed felt like proof. I wasn't enough. Not enough wife to keep him alive. Not enough mother to know how to feed them. Not enough woman to make this land give instead of take. Ruth's worn shoes flashed through my mind. Michael's pants showing ankle. The root cellar door I kept locked so they wouldn't see how little we had left. I told myself I didn't need help. I'd buried one man already. I wouldn't bury my pride, too. Pride tasted better than charity. Even when your children asked for second helpings, you couldn't give. 18 months, I'd been standing alone. 18 months, telling myself I was strong enough. The garden knew I was lying before I did. The withered plants were just being honest about what I wouldn't admit I was drowning in dirt that wouldn't cooperate and knowledge I didn't possess. That's when Tom's wagon stopped at my fence. I should have known then, should have recognized the sound of everything changing. But I was too busy being stubborn, too practiced at refusing what I needed most. Nothing grows alone, not even determined women, especially not them. The wagon wheels creaked to a stop. A man's voice called out, asking permission to speak. I straightened my spine, lifted my chin, prepared to send him away. I should have known the garden was about to teach me lessons that had nothing to do with vegetables. Tom Davies looked like weathered leather, maybe 45, with hands that knew work and eyes that saw too much. I watched him watching me struggle with my shovel. Saw him see my failure written in wilted rows and packed earth. My spine went steel. "Ma'am," he called from the fence line. Respectful distance maintained. "Don't mean to intrude, but that soil looks clay heavy. Tough to work without amending." I managed to tell him I was handling it just fine, even as my shovel bounced off earth that had defeated me 3 springs running. My voice came out harder than I meant. Pride is that sharpens your edges when you're trying to protect your soft places. He didn't push. Just mentioned companion planning. Asked if I'd tried it. Said his grandmother swore by it. The way he spoke about her gentle, reverent, made me pause. Men who loved their grandmothers might be safe. Might be before I could send him away proper. My children appeared, Michael defensive at my shoulder. Emma and Lucy curious. Baby Ruth toddling over on unsteady legs. Tom crouched to their level, which surprised me. Talked about seeds like telling stories, how pumpkins could shade lettuce from harsh sun, how beans fed the soil itself, gave back what they took. I watched Ruth's hopeful eyes as he described it, saw Michael's shoulders relax slightly, noticed Emma lean in to listen better. He was seeing my family, not my failure. That distinction mattered more than I wanted to admit. "I've got surplus seeds," Tom said, standing but staying at respectful distance. "And some knowledge my grandmother taught me, if you'd like. I could show you some techniques. Weekends. Maybe just an hour or two." Part of me wanted to send him away. Accepting help meant admitting defeat. But I heard myself ask, "What do you want in return?" He looked genuinely confused. "Return. Nobody helps for nothing." Tom was quiet a moment. Then he said, "Farming wisdom should be shared, not hoarded. My grandmother taught me that. Said knowledge dies when you keep it to yourself, multiplies when you give it away." He glanced at my children. "You'll pass it on someday. That's payment enough." I studied him for traps. What did he want? What did men always want from widows? But his eyes stayed kind, his distance respectful. Maybe that scared me more kindness I wasn't sure how to handle. "You don't have to decide now," he continued. "But if you'd like help, I'm 3 miles west. Tom Davies." My grandmother raised me after my parents died, taught me farming, and most of life worth knowing. Michael stepped forward. "What kind of seeds?" Tom smiled. "Every kind. Beans, squash, tomatoes. Some herbs your mama might like for cooking. Enough to share," I heard myself say. "Maybe you could show me." The words surprised us both. Tom's eyebrows rose slightly. My heart raced with immediate regret. "Saturday," he offered. "Morning I could bring what you need. Show you how to start." I nodded before I could take it back. "Saturday, 2 hours. Nothing more." "Fair enough. Ma'am." He tipped his hat to me, then to the children. "Looking forward to it." His wagon rolled away. I stood in my failing garden with 4 children staring at me. Michael asked if I was sure. Emma wanted to know if he seemed nice. Lucy announced she liked him. Ruth just hummed. Content? I told myself it was for the children. I told myself it was just about vegetables. I was lying. Even then, hope is terrifying when you've learned to live without it. That night, I lay awake, wondering what I'd agreed to, wondering if letting someone help meant I'd failed, wondering why his grandmother's voice and his words made me feel less alone than I'd felt in 18 months. Saturday, I thought. I could always send him away if things felt wrong. I should have known the only thing I'd send away was my own loneliness. Saturday morning arrived with spring sun and my nerves wound tight. I'd cleaned the children, straightened the cabin, made coffee in the good pot I'd been saving. Armor dressed as hospitality. Tom's wagon appeared at 9 exactly. The children ran to greet him before I could stop them. He had a crate of seeds, some tools, burlap bags of what looked like compost. Ruth grabbed his hand immediately, already trusting. 3-year-olds have no sense of Proper boundaries. "Morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Brought what we'll need to get started." I poured coffee, handed him a cup. "I told my children Saturdays, 2 hours. Nothing more. I needed rules to feel safe. Hope that's acceptable." He agreed, like I'd offered something reasonable instead of walls disguised as boundaries. "Works for me. Shall we start with soil testing?" The first lesson began with earth between fingers. Tom showed me how to read clay content, drainage, what amendments the soil needed. He explained why, not just what, respected my intelligence enough to give me reasons, not just instructions. "Clay soil's not bad," he said, kneading dirt in his palm. "Just needs help. Compost opens it up, lets roots breathe. Sand improves drainage. You're not fighting the soil, just teaching it to work with you." I liked that teaching. Not fighting. Made failure feel less personal. Michael joined us, asking smart questions about nitrogen and soil composition. Tom answered seriously. Never talked down. I watched my son stand taller under male attention. Something in my chest cracked. I'd been so focused on surviving, I'd forgotten they needed more than food. They needed to see possibility. Emma and Lucy helped mix compost into the rows. Ruth played near our feet, babbling her own garden wisdom in words only she understood. Tom let them all participate, treated them as capable instead of obstacles. "Your husband teach you any of this?" Tom asked carefully. "Some," I admitted. I didn't pay enough attention. Thought I had time. He nodded. Didn't push. Time's tricky that way. I noticed things as we worked. How he never touched. Without asking permission, "May I show you?" The way he thanked me for coffee like it was fine china instead of chipped cups. How he knew my children's names by the second hour, though I'd only said them once. He told us about his grandmother while we planted. How she'd raised him alone after his parents died in a hard winter. How she'd taught him that strength wasn't refusing help, it was knowing when to lean and when to stand. "She'd work this garden at dawn," Tom said, pressing bean seeds into amended soil. "Talk to the plants like prayers. Said you can't harvest what you won't plant. Meant more than vegetables." I understood what he meant, but I wasn't ready to plant anything except food. By the time Tom's wagon rolled away, the garden had begun transformation. Compost mixed in. Companion planting mapped out. Seeds in soil that suddenly felt possible. I'd agreed to next Saturday. The deal was made, though neither of us named what was really taking root. Michael announced Tom knew what he was talking about. Emma said she hoped he'd come back. Lucy declared she loved gardens now. Ruth was asleep against my hip, dirt under her fingernails, content. I stood in the garden after they were all inside, soil still warm from our work. I told myself it was just about vegetables. I was lying. The truth was already growing, and I didn't know if I had the courage to harvest it. But I'd agreed to Saturday. That was something. That was dangerous. That was the first crack in walls I'd built, careful and high. 6 Saturdays now. Pattern established his wagon at 9, children running to greet him like he belonged there. Hours in the garden. Coffee breaks on the porch where we talked about weather and soil and nothing that mattered too much. I'd stopped pretending I didn't listen for his arrival Friday nights. The garden was responding to his teaching. Peas climbed their stakes properly. Lettuce spread lush and green. Early carrots promised abundance I hadn't seen in 3 years. Everything he touched seemed to grow right. I noticed things about Tom I didn't want to notice. The way he brought extra seeds every week, just in case these don't take. Tools left casually that made my weekday work easier. Howie never mentioned my mistakes, just showed me better methods the following Saturday. His grandmother's voice in everything he taught. She'd say, "Tom, you can't harvest what you won't plant." He told me one morning while we worked on pest management. Meant you had to risk the work before you could expect results. No shortcuts to growing. I wondered if he knew he was teaching me more than gardening. Small moments accumulated like good soil. Tom playing with Ruth while Michael and I worked on crop rotation. His patience when I argued about tomato spacing, he let me try it my way. Was gracious when I admitted he'd been right. The coffee ritual expanding, he brought honey one week. Said it reminded him of his grandmother's table. She kept bees, he explained, stirring honey into his cup. Said sweetness takes work, too. You tend the bees. They give you gold. I started caring whether my hair was braided neat on Saturday mornings. Started noticing his smile reached his eyes. Made them crinkle at corners. Started feeling things I'd promised myself I'd buried with Daniel. This wasn't the deal. This wasn't safe. I'd spent 18 months not letting myself want anything except survival. Now here was this man teaching me about companion planting, and all I could think about was how lonely silence could be, even when you got used to it. The garden was thriving, beans climbing, squash sprawling, tomatoes setting fruit early. I was thriving too, though I fought it. Didn't know which scared me more, him leaving or him staying. Then came the moment that changed everything. Both reaching for the same trowel, fingers brushing. Electric pause that lasted forever and no time at all. Him pulling back, apologizing. Me frozen, heart racing like I'd run miles. The rest of that morning careful, distant. He left earlier than usual. Said something about chores at home. I watched his wagon disappear and hated myself for the disappointment. That night, I lay awake remembering the warmth of his hand, feeling guilty. Daniel had only been gone 18 months. Too soon, people would say. But grief doesn't ask permission before it starts releasing its grip. I'd learned that the hard way. The voice in my head, Daniel's voice. Or maybe my own said the words he'd spoken before he died. You're stronger than you know. Promise me you'll be happy again. I'd promised, then forgotten. Or maybe just been too scared to remember. I thought about Tom's grandmother, working gardens at dawn, talking to plants like prayers, planning what mattered even when harvest wasn't guaranteed. Risk before results. No shortcuts to growing. I noticed I'd started setting out 2 coffee cups before he arrived each Saturday. Noticed the second plate appearing at breakfast. Small declarations my heart was making that my mind refused to acknowledge. The following Saturday, Tom didn't come. Sent word through a neighbor business in town. He'd said, "Be back next week." The children asked why. I told them I didn't know. But standing in that garden, alone. Tools he'd left, scattered like promises. I knew exactly what I felt. I missed him, and missing someone meant I'd let him matter. That terrified me more than any failed harvest ever could. Wednesday night, Ruth burned with fever. Small body radiating heat. Coughing that rattled her tiny chest. I was up all night with cool cloths and prayers and terror, remembering how fast Daniel went. How fever takes everything if you don't watch careful. By morning, Ruth was better. Fever broken. Sleeping peaceful. I was destroyed. Hadn't slept, couldn't eat. Ran on fear and coffee and the kind of exhaustion that makes everything feel underwater. The garden was neglected all week. House descended into chaos. Other children anxious, watching their mother fracture in ways they couldn't name but understood instinctively. Saturday morning, Tom arrived at his usual time. Found me barely functioning unwashed hair. Yesterday's dress. Eyes hollowed out from a week of worry and one night of terror. Children scattered, untended. Garden wilting. My carefully maintained walls completely gone. He took one look and didn't ask permission. Just started working. Sent Michael to pump water. Emma to watch Ruth. Lucy to gather eggs. Sat me down on the porch with coffee I didn't remember making. Wouldn't let me refuse. Talk to me, he said. Not a request, an offer. And I broke. Told him everything. Daniel's death, how fast fever took him. 3 days from healthy to gone. How I couldn't stop it. Couldn't do anything except watch helpless. How I lie awake, terrified I'll fail. Lose another one. Prove everyone right who said I couldn't manage alone. How I don't know if I'm teaching my children strength or just showing them my fear. I hadn't cried since Daniel's funeral. Hadn't let myself. Tears were permission to feel. And feeling meant admitting how much everything hurt. But sitting there with Tom's patient eyes and Ruth's fever fresh in my memory, I just broke. And he let me. Didn't try to fix it or offer empty comfort. Just listened while I fell apart. Then said something that rearranged how I saw myself. You're the strongest person I know. Sarah, I laughed. Bitter. I'm falling apart. Exactly, he said. Takes strength to break. Weak people pretend they're fine. You're honest enough to admit when you're not. Then he told me about his grandmother. How she'd raised him alone after his parents died in a winter that took half the county. How he'd find her at dawn in her garden, crying into her hands before starting another impossible day. She taught me strength isn't refusing help, Tom said quietly. It's knowing when to lean and when to stand. You've been standing 18 months. Sarah, maybe it's time to lean a little. I looked at him through tears I couldn't stop. I'm scared. Every night I'm scared that I'll lose them, that I'll fail them, that I'm not enough. Tom was quiet a long time. Then, fear means you love them. Wouldn't trust a mother who wasn't scared. But Sarah, you're already enough. You've been enough all along. You just needed someone to teach you what you already knew how to learn. Something in my chest that had been clenched tight for 18 months loosened slightly. Not healed, just less broken. He stayed the full day. Caught up the garden, straightened the house, played with the children while I slept 2 hours on the porch. When I woke, he had soup warming and the children fed and everything manageable again. I don't know how to thank you. I said, Don't. He replied, This is what neighbors do. What friends do. He paused. What people who care about each other do. I met his eyes. Saw something there that matched what I'd been feeling. Something that terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. After he left, garden caught up, house restored, children settled, I sat with what I'd admitted. I wanted to lean. Wanted to let him help with more than soil and seeds. Wanted to stop pretending I didn't wait for Saturdays like breath. The crack in my armor wasn't breaking me. It was letting light through. I just didn't know if I could stand the brightness. If I could risk the dark that comes when light goes away. 3 weeks later, Tom didn't arrive. 9 o'clock passed. Then 10. No word. No message. I tried not to worry. Told myself he didn't owe me explanations. We had a deal. Not a relationship. But the children kept asking, "Where's Mr. Tom?" And I didn't have answers that satisfied either them or myself. Noon arrived with neighbor Miller. Saw Tom yesterday. Miller said, "Wagon accident on the Ridge Road. Horse spooked. Tom thrown, leg broken. Laid up at his place 3 miles west." Miller's tone suggested thought you'd want to know. I didn't hesitate. Packed soup, bread, bandages. Loaded all 4 children in our wagon. Michael asked where we were going. "To help someone who helped us," I said simply. This was choice. This was agency. This was deciding that caring mattered more than protecting myself. Tom's cabin was smaller than I'd imagined. Neat but solitary. Books stacked careful. His grandmother's quilts folded precise. Pictures of a woman who must be the one who raised him. Evidence of a man living alone. Carefully, Tom in bed, leg splinted. Clearly in pain. Trying to maintain pride even while relieved to see us. My children took over immediately, Michael fetching water without being asked. Emma straightening, organizing, improving everything she touched. Lucy entertaining Ruth with quiet games. Baby making Tom smile despite pain. I cleaned, cooked, tended, saw his vulnerability, recognized my own. We were both alone, both pretending we preferred it. Almost didn't ask Miller to tell you. Tom admitted while I changed his bandage. Didn't want to burden you. I stopped, looked at him steady. You've been helping me 5 months. You think I won't return the favor? He smiled, tired but real. Fair point. Besides, I said, testing new words, you taught me about companion planting. Turns out it works for people too. We talked honestly then, about loneliness we'd both been carrying, about how Saturdays had become essential to both of us, about how somewhere between soil testing and seed planting, we'd become more than teacher and student. I love you, Tom said quietly. Have since the 3rd Saturday, when you argued about crop rotation and proved you were right. Stayed quiet because I wanted you to choose. Not feel obligated. My hands shook arranging his blanket. I'm terrified. Me too, he admitted, but Sarah being terrified means it matters. Wouldn't be scared if I didn't care this much. I looked around his cabin, saw his careful solitude, his ordered loneliness, understood what he'd risked teaching us. He'd opened his life to our chaos. Now I could return the gift. Late afternoon, preparing to leave, Ruth asleep against me. Emma asked from the wagon, "Is Mr. Tom going to be our family now?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. But the question settled in my chest like a seed in good soil. On the ride home, I thought about what Tom said, about choosing, about companion planting working for people, about how beans need corn and corn needs beans, about how maybe needing wasn't weakness, just honest growing. The children were quiet, tired from helpful work. Michael handled the reins careful. I let myself think the dangerous thought I'd been avoiding. We were already family. We just hadn't made it official. And that thought terrified and thrilled me so completely, I couldn't separate which feeling was which anymore. 3 weeks later, Tom was healing, but the fear was growing faster. Late September now. Harvest approaching. I'd been managing 2 gardens, mine thriving. His maintained, evidence of partnership everywhere. Everything should feel hopeful. Instead, terror. Midnight found me in the garden, unable to sleep. Stood under stars, looking at abundance we'd created together. Beans climbing perfect. Squash sprawling healthy. Tomatoes heavy with fruit instead of joy. I felt cold sweat and racing heart. Panic, all the what-ifs surfacing like weeds. What if he leaves once he's healed? What if this was charity, not connection? What if my children love him and lose him, like they lost Daniel? What if I let myself need him and he dies fever, accident? Any of the 1,000 ways this land takes people, I could end it now. Tell Tom the lessons are done. We've learned enough. I can manage alone. Protect the children. Protect myself. Go back to the safety of solitude. At least loneliness is predictable. Memory hit hard. Daniel 3 days before he died, standing in this same garden, teaching me about companion planting, patient with my questions, how he'd said, "Sarah, promise me something. If something happens to me, promise you'll let yourself be happy again. Promise you won't become one of those women who buries herself with her husband." I'd laughed, promised, forgotten, until now. I stood in that garden testament to everything Tom taught me and wanted to destroy it. Not literally, but metaphorically, end it before it could end me. Because I'd learned something these 18 months. You can't lose what you refuse to love. And I was dangerously close to loving Tom. The garden looked different in moonlight silver and strange. Familiar rose turned foreign. Like my life. I'd gotten comfortable with grief, knew its contours, could navigate its darkness. But hope was terrifying territory. One wrong step, and you fall. And the fall from hope hurts worse than anything else. I thought about my children asleep in the cabin, Michael asking Tom about wagon repair, Emma planning his visits like holidays, Lucy calling him Mr. Tom, with ownership in her voice. Ruth reaching for him like he belonged. I'd been teaching them survival meant being alone. Tom was teaching them thriving meant being together. Which lesson did I want them to learn? The voice in my head. Daniel's voice. Definitely has said those last words again. You're stronger than you know. I'd spent 18 months trying to prove that right while believing it wrong. But what if strength wasn't standing alone? What if it was choosing to lean, choosing to risk, choosing love? Even when loss is possible, Tom had taught me about companion planting, how certain things grow stronger, together than alone. He'd meant vegetables. But the lesson applied to more. Beans need corn. Corn needs beans. Systems supporting systems. Growth requiring partnership. Maybe I needed Tom. Maybe he needed me. Maybe needing wasn't weakness, just honest recognition of how things actually grow. I looked at the garden in moonlight. Noticed the gate Tom fixed, swung smooth now. No dragging. The tool shed he'd organized, everything accessible, thoughtful. Evidence everywhere that he'd already woven himself into our lives. The empty coffee cup in my hand mocked me. One cup. Like always. Except it wasn't always anymore. There'd been 2 cups for months. I'd just been pretending not to notice. Somewhere between panic and dawn, I understood. Tom taught me about companion planting, taught me that certain things grow stronger together, taught me that expertise shared multiplies while expertise hoarded stagnates. He'd meant farming, but the lesson was bigger. I could stand alone. had proven that 18 months. But I could thrive together, could choose partnership over solitude, could risk love after loss. Growth requires risk, harvest requires faith. And I was ready terrified, but ready to plant what mattered most. By morning, I knew what I had to choose. Not safety, not comfortable loneliness. Something far more dangerous. Hope. Harvest day arrived with September sun, and my nerves wound impossibly tight. The garden overflowed. More than my family could eat. Abundance beyond anything I'd imagined 5 months ago. Physical proof that Tom's teaching worked, that I'd learned, that together we'd created something extraordinary. Tom arrived walking almost normal now. Leg healed enough, brought baskets for harvest. Children ran to greet him like every Saturday. Except I'd been awake since dawn, rehearsing words that felt too big for my mouth. This was the day. I'd decided we worked together through morning children helping, laughing, efficient as a family that had been doing this forever instead of just months. Tom showing Michael which pumpkins were ready. Emma how to check squash ripeness. Lucy pulled carrots, shrieking delight at each orange treasure. Ruth rode Tom's shoulders, surveying her kingdom. Picture of what we could be permanently. If I found the courage, noon break, coffee on the porch. Children playing in garden rows, their laughter the soundtrack to everything good. My hands shook slightly as I set down my cup. Tom, I need to tell you something. He waited, patient as always, those kind eyes that saw too much. I'd practiced these words for a week. Lay awake arranging them, trying to find the right combination that said, I want you, but I'm terrified. Stay but know I'm fragile. Love me, but let me be strong. In the end, the words came simpler than I'd practiced. I almost sent you away last month. I stood in this garden at midnight, ready to tell you we didn't need more lessons, that we'd learned enough. Tom's face didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, braced. I was scared. I continued, terrified, actually, because letting you matter meant risking loss. And I'd already lost so much, I didn't think I could survive losing more. I made myself look at him directly. Needed him to see I meant this. But Tom, I've been falling for you since the day you stopped your wagon. Maybe before I knew it myself. And I don't need someone to save me. This part was crucial. I've saved myself. These 18 months, I've learned I'm stronger than I knew. Your grandmother was right about that. I'm strong. He started to speak. I held up my hand. But I'd like someone to share the harvest with. If you're willing, if you feel the same. Silence stretched. Long enough I almost took it back. Almost said never mind. Forget I spoke. We can just keep doing Saturdays forever without naming what this is. Then Tom reached across the space between us slowly, asking permission without words, and took my hand. Sarah, he said, voice rough with something that might have been relief or joy or both. I've loved you since the third Saturday. When you argued with me about crop rotation and proved you were right. When you showed me you weren't just surviving, you were thinking, learning, growing. I stayed quiet because I wanted you to choose, not feel obligated. My throat was too tight for words. I'm choosing. I managed. I'm terrified. But I'm choosing. If you'll have me, have us. I gestured toward the children. playing in a garden we'd grown together. We're a package deal. He laughed. Actually laughed. Sarah, I fell in love with all of you. Can't imagine it any other way. Then, more serious, I can't promise I won't die. Can't promise forever. This land's too hard for promises like that. But I can promise I'll show up. I'll teach what I know. I'll share the work and the harvest. And I'll love you and those children with everything I have, for as long as I have. That's all I'm asking. I whispered. Show up. That's all. The rest we'll figure out as we go. He raised my hand, kissed my knuckles gentle. I can do that. Michael appeared on the porch then, saw us holding hands, grinned wide. Finally, Emma owes me a nickel. I said you'd figure it out by harvest. The girls crowded around, Lucy demanding to know if Mr. Tom was staying forever. Ruth just climbed into Tom's lap, settled there like she'd always belonged. Which she had. Which they all did. Not quite forever yet, Tom said, looking at me with question in his eyes. But working toward it, if your mama's agreeable. 4 children stared at me. Tom held my gaze steady. I thought about Daniel's last words, about being happy, about promises made and kept and honored through living instead of through grief. I'm agreeable, I said. Emma shrieked. Lucy danced. Michael smiled his rare smile. Ruth just patted Tom's cheek, satisfied with this development she'd clearly expected all along. Tom and I didn't talk about marriage yet too fast. Too much. But we talked about him moving some things to the homestead, about working both properties, about seeing where seasons took us. We planted garlic together that afternoon. Garlic takes months to mature. It's a promise, a commitment to a future we'd tend together. I pressed each clove into soil with Tom's hand over mine, teaching me spacing. The children planted their own rows, declaring it family garlic. That night, after Tom left, promising to return tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days after that, I stood in the garden we'd grown together. The garden that was never just about vegetables. It was about teaching, sharing, trusting, choosing. I'd started this season desperate and alone, fighting soil that wouldn't give. I was ending it abundant and accompanied, standing on ground that finally yielded. Tom taught me more than farming. He taught me that accepting help isn't weakness. That vulnerability is just another word for honest. That love after loss is possible, terrifying, but possible. And that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stop standing alone and start standing together. I chose that. Chose him. Chose us. And for the first time in 18 months, I slept through the night. Hopeful, terrified, alive. 1 year later, I stood in the same garden teaching another woman what Tom taught me. Late autumn again. Full circle, except everything was different now. Martha was young, maybe 25. Widowed 3 months with 2 small children. She reminded me of myself a year ago, proud, scared, drowning, but refusing to admit it. I saw my past in her defensive shoulders, her insistence she was managing fine. Clay soil's not bad, I told her, echoing Tom's words from that first Saturday. Just needs help. You're not fighting it, just teaching it to work with you. She looked at me like I was speaking wisdom instead of just passing forward what I'd learned. That's what knowledge does, multiplies when shared. Dies when hoarded. Tom's grandmother knew. Tom taught me. Now I was teaching Martha. Tom and I married in spring. Quiet ceremony. Children holding flowers. Practical vows about partnership and patience. I kept my name, added his. Sarah Baker Davies felt honest, past and present together. Both honored. He'd moved to my homestead, brought his books and tools and his grandmother's quilts, brought his steady presence and patient teaching and love that felt like being seen. Completely. We argued sometimes about planting schedules, about money, about whether the children needed stricter discipline or more freedom. Partnership isn't fairy tales. It's negotiation, compromise, choosing each other even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That's the part stories don't tell you happily ever after is work. Beautiful work. But work? The garden now fed our family plus 12 others. We sold surplus at market. I'd started teaching 3 widows, 2 young couples, anyone who asked. Saturday lessons multiplied. Tom and I co-teaching, children helping younger ones learn. Michael worked the garden with Tom now, learning manhood alongside farming. Emma helped me teach, patient with nervous students. Lucy talked to plants like prayers, channeling Tom's grandmother's spirit. Ruth Four now played in soil we'd all enriched together, already understanding rhythms of growth and harvest. Martha's hands shook, pulling weeds. I covered them with mine, channeling every kind word Tom ever gave me. "Does it get easier?" she asked quietly. Being alone, I considered. Chose honesty. Yes and no. You get stronger. But Martha, strong doesn't mean alone. I fought that lesson hard. Took a stubborn farmer stopping his wagon to teach me that accepting help isn't surrender. It's wisdom. She looked at me with desperate hope. You really believe that I'm living proof? I said simply. They asked me sometimes other widows, women learning to survive, they asked if I felt guilty. Loving again. Moving forward. The answer's complicated. Yes and no. Guilt came in waves that first year. Still does. Occasionally. Daniel's memory sits gentle now instead of sharp. I honor him by living instead of by grieving, by teaching our children resilience. By choosing happiness, he explicitly asked me to find. I believe love doesn't diminish because you find it twice. Believe hearts can hold multiple truths, grief and joy, loss and hope, past and present, all together. Tom appeared from the other garden, carrying baskets of late tomatoes. Our eyes met across rows we'd planted together. He smiled. Still made my heart skip after a year of marriage. Probably always would. That's what choosing each other daily does. Keeps it fresh, keeps it real. Martha watched us, hunger in her eyes for what she'd lost. It'll come, I told her gently. Maybe not the same way twice, but it'll come. You just have to keep your hands in the soil. Keep planting what matters. Keep having faith that growth is possible even after everything's been torn down. She nodded, not quite believing, but wanting to. I understood. I'd been there, stood in failing gardens, convinced nothing good could grow from such hard ground. Tom joined us, added his teaching to mine, showed Martha pest management, crop rotation, all the practical wisdom his grandmother passed to him. She soaked it in, desperate for knowledge that might save her. After she left, Tom and I stood in our garden at sunset. Coffee cups on the porch rail, 2 instead of 1. Always 2 now. Children playing nearby, their laughter the best crop we'd ever grown. You're good at this, Tom said, nodding toward where Martha's wagon had disappeared. Learn from the best, I replied, leaning into his shoulder. My grandmother would have liked you, he said softly. Would have said you understand what she tried to teach me, that expertise shared multiplies. That knowledge is meant to be passed forward, like seeds. That the real harvest isn't what you keep, but what you give. I thought about that. About how Tom stopped his wagon last spring because he couldn't stand watching someone struggle with knowledge he possessed. About how that one choice his to stop, mine to accept, changed everything. I thought that garden would save us from hunger, I said quietly. Didn't know it would save us from loneliness. Tom kissed the top of my head. Gardens do that. Give you more than you planted, if you tend them right. I looked at our life children thriving, students learning, community growing, love deepening daily. Looked at dirt that finally gave instead of fought. Looked at abundance created through partnership and patience, and choosing hope even when fear felt safer. This is what blooms when you stop hoarding and start sharing. This is what grows when you let light through the cracks in your armor. This is what happens when you choose hope over safety, partnership over solitude, love after loss. This is the life we built. One seed at a time, one Saturday, one choice, one cup of coffee becoming two. I stood in dirt that wouldn't give until someone taught me how to ask. Now, I teach others. That's the harvest that never ends, love. Knowledge, community, passed forward like seeds, growing long after we're gone. This is what we built. This is what blooms. This is enough.